Today on That's Truckin News, we're going to talk about a law that could change trucking forever. Coming up. In a trucking market such as ours today, our biggest hurdle is time. A new proposal has been slated to work its way through Congress. And here, as of late, within the last 30 days, we've heard little, if not nothing, about it. A bill basically containing one line of text could make the difference as to exactly how easy or hard it is to run a truck in today's economy. And it could change everything.
In today's trucking market, our biggest hurdle is time. The single commodity over-the-road drivers statistically work against most. Next to money, time is a precious commodity for every owner-operator, and like money, there never seems to be enough of it. The average miles covered in a day for most truckers is around 400 miles. That equates to around $1,000. 1 hour can equate to around $150. Every hour lost in traffic represents time that could be used to complete additional shipments or make additional money. In the span of a year, that ends up being a lot of wasted revenue. This is even more so true of delays resulting from shipper or receiver-related delays. Trucks that experience delays do so at a rate of about 1.2 billion hours of delay each year. The added up delays are staggering. Drivers that go 125,000 miles a year have to deal with an average loss of around $32,350 out of pocket.
The intent of said legislation, while it's designed to make right some of the wrongs of the past 80 years, can be both devastating and yet at the same time just what the industry needs. The thing that I'm talking about is the Guaranteed Overtime Pay for Truckers Act, a one-line text item that's going through Congress, which is designed to eliminate an exemption in the Fair Labor and Standards Act. It basically exempts truckers from being qualified for overtime pay for any work done over 40 hours. What it does for all other industries is basically guarantees that if you put in 40 hours worth of work, you get paid for 40 hours worth of work. And if you go over that 40 hours, you're paid a time and a half, or in some cases, other scales, but you get more for working over 40 hours. With trucking, it's a little bit more difficult because most truckers are paid by the mile, or they're paid under contract by the load. But the one thing it leaves out is the time that most drivers sit at loading docks, unable to gain the mileage, unable to get the additional load, but are forced to sit there for long periods of time, waiting on a job which we have no control over. A lot of companies have exceptions in their contracts and clauses that allow drivers or owner-operators to charge for periods of time over set minimums, such as 2 hours, in some cases 3 hours. Every contract's different, but we have to give in order to get, which basically makes our time worthless. In a recent study where drivers were surveyed, almost 63% of drivers surveyed stated that they would have to wait an average exceeding over 3 hours waiting to get either loaded or unloaded. This fact has no doubt gotten worse over the last couple of years. So a fair question to be asked is, what if this kind of law were to go into effect? How would that affect us? Would the way this thing is being set up allow for us truckers to now no longer fall into that exemption and therefore be paid based on the standards originally set in the Fair Labor and Standards Act?
Companies are going to want to maintain the per mile rate because they know they've eliminated all surplus labor. At the same time, of course, drivers are going to want an hourly system to be like everyone else that works with limited hours. For a factory worker, it is worth $20 an hour to push a button all day. This, however, is the counter argument from truckers. Is unloading a truck worth $15 an hour? Is pre-trips and fueling worth around $4 an hour? Where does the argument of time start and the lack of productivity stop? Time is money in either case. Because our jobs require constant situational changes, it's necessary to have a flexibility in the pay scale. Safety involves a widely varying scope of responsibility, and therefore can be hard to quantify and break down. One of the deficits that could be negative to the industry would be a push for an hourly standard, making drivers and owners justify each and every second while a majority of that time is spent on non-driving tasks. The industry will suffer in both revenue and productivity as this theme for shortcuts surfaces and becomes the norm.
If such a thing were to happen, what would happen to the industry? As we would see record shortages and huge amounts of adjustments. We are already in an industry that's already touted as being one that's short, some 100,000 drivers. Companies are going to start stepping back and looking at their bottom line and start to analyze exactly what they're doing. Those company drivers that currently work with major carriers would suddenly find themselves falling short on hours. Because now, if you're required to be paid over 40 hours, you're going to make more money. Most companies don't want to pay more, they want to pay less. Owner-operators would certainly feel a pinch too, because currently we have a mileage rate or a load rate which reflects current trends, but if this law changes things, we're going to start seeing a lot more modified rates and adjusted contracts to account for this new pay scale that suddenly everybody has to meet. Rates for freight for OTR drivers and other drivers paid by the mile would be adjusted to accommodate for this new time on the dock we're suddenly faced with. With all these new numbers floating around, the volume of freight is going to start to drop precipitously. The trucking industry as a whole would begin to suffer, as one of the large cliches you're familiar with hearing is it's always profit over cost. There's still a lot going on, but there's a lot of people in the trucking industry that have a dog in the fight. But one of the things that hasn't been addressed is exactly who and how a benefit would be seen from such a law as described here. Clearly, a majority of the truckers that are OTR drivers, that own their own trucks, that have their own authority, most of us are paid on a contractual basis. Time isn't even considered unless you're sitting at a receiver for an extremely long period of time. If we sit at a shipper for 6 hours, we currently will only get 4 hours of that pay. So my thought to make this amendment worthwhile and benefit us in any way, shape, or form is that we're paid on actual time. No giving 2 hours, no giving anything. However, that being said, not enough information is out there yet to clearly determine what direction that would take us. If this new debate over trucking pay has done one thing, it's made it clear that if these smaller trucking companies are to survive, then there needs to be reforms to enable those in business to treat us more fairly. Truckers, while revered for their saving the day tendencies, we still have to live. And I must say, not for mere 50 cents on the dollar. Managing time in an industry whose pay models are as chaotic as the industry itself requires more than what one bill amendment can fix. When you look at a trucker's average day, the fact that we have to wait greater than 3 hours at a receiver usually procures further delays down the line. And so starts the impending delay spiral that all truckers get involved in. Average revenue being lost can be between $500 and $1,000 a day for each day that we're delayed in any significant way, shape, or form. Comment down below, drivers, who disagree with me in any way. I'd be interested to know your take. At the end of the day, the less we're delayed, the more we make. And if you're paid on mileage, delays at a receiver, whether paid or unpaid, can be the biggest Achilles heel a driver faces. Now, if this new law goes into effect, it would do two things. First, it would require shippers to be more efficient and be more timely with the jobs that they do. Second thing would be the logistics behind said loads. That would have to change, and it would probably change to include a little bit better time between pickup and delivery, which, comment down below, drivers, you probably know they don't do very well. I welcome experts in the logistics side of things to weigh in and tell me if I'm right. One question has to be asked in this video, and it's simply, why reinvent the wheel? A majority of drivers are paid by the load or paid by the mile. Time has very little to do with our job other than being required to use an ELD, which we're not paid on. Everybody in commerce today has the same goal, and that's turn the most profit with the least expense. So what's really at the core of this new proposal? The reforms that they're talking about are ones that would clearly negatively impact the industry as a whole. Gone would be the days where drivers like you and me would be paid by the mile. All of those kinds of contracts would probably go in the trash. They're going through the back door to make sure that independent contractors like you and me to then sign on W-2s and control the money we make. But it's not the money we make, it's the taxes we pay. Government agencies are so afraid of us not paying our taxes correctly and paying them the money that they think they're owed, that they require us to be paid under the single model of time on a W-2 scale, so they feel more confident that we're paying more in taxes. So as we go further into this year, watch closely all the legislation being put forth through the DOT, FMCSA, and anyone that has anything to do with this House bill on guaranteed pay for truckers, because it's going to negatively affect the industry if it goes through. If they decline to move forward with it, then everything should remain the same. With that having been said, I do think a lot needs to be done to address the exceeding amount of time that a lot of truckers are sitting at docks waiting on loads. That does need to be addressed. But I don't think it requires the needing sweeping changes the government is trying to go from a law that dates back 80 years. Pay attention to your load boards. Look at the load volumes as they currently exist, because if this law goes into effect, load volumes will most likely fall, and fall quickly they will. So if you're interested in the trucking industry, or if you just want to learn about this new law coming into effect, hit the subscribe button and be sure to follow along, as each week I put out more videos on trending topics in the trucking industry that you need to know to make more money. Whatever happens, drivers, while you're on the road, certainly be safe and think of others. We'll see you on the next one.